Good morning. Welcome back. Happy Friday. Got a great show for you today. We're obviously not in the home studio, but if you're listening in, then I guess we are, because all you are used to is just hearing the sound of my voice. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I believe most Americans feel in our gut, but that we're too afraid to say out loud, which is that political violence here in the United States is no longer hypothetical because it's here and it's happening often. We're seeing brutal attacks in our cities, rising hostility online, to now recently lawmakers openly encouraging the military and intelligence agency to ignore President Trump's lawful orders. It's clear that something in our country has snapped. We used to disagree, we used to debate, but now we dehumanize and we celebrate violence against political opponents. And the polls show it now more than ever that more Americans today believe that violence may be necessary to get the country back on track than at any point in modern history. How did we get here? Who's fueling this? And what does it mean for the future of our country? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and we're going to dive right into those hard questions. And we're going to discover the answers together. I'm Bryce Wheeler. Welcome back. This is We the Future. Let's get after it. So talking about this is important. It's obviously something that I believe is serious enough to warrant an entire episode about it. But it's something that I believe most of the media refuses to discuss, and that it's something that should terrify every single sane person in this country. Because what we are witnessing right now is not random violence. It's not isolated incidents. It's the direct consequence of a political movement that has abandoned order, abandoned morality, and abandoned the basic principles that keep a nation civilized. Now, we talked about it a few weeks ago, but I want us to go back to, and let's start with, Chicago. If you didn't see what recently happened in Chicago, a woman, an ordinary American woman, going about her life was set on fire. I want you to think about that for a moment. A human being in an American city being burned alive in the street. No motive that makes sense, no explanation that justifies it, just pure, unrestrained violence. And of course, what we've seen in the last few days since that's happened, the media just shrugs. Chicago shrugs. The Chicago mayor comes out and says that it's an isolated incident, that it's not something that happens regularly. And the political left that run these cities, they tell you that crime is overblown, that everything is fine, and that you're the crazy one for noticing the collapse happening right in front of your face. But remember, it's not just Chicago that we're seeing this happen in. It's also, recently, North Carolina. Just a few weeks ago, a young Ukrainian girl, a refugee, someone who came to this country because they believed that it's safe, was stabbed in the neck to death on a public bus. Targeted, attacked, ignored by watching bystanders. And once again, the politicians who preach compassion and tolerance, they say nothing. Why? Because acknowledging what's happening would mean admitting that their policies are producing chaos, that their ideology is producing violence, that their version of America is becoming dangerous for anyone who dares simply to exist. But here's the part that nobody is prepared for. While cities burn, while innocent people are being attacked in broad daylight, while violent extremists roam without consequences, Democratic lawmakers released recently, within the last day or two, released a video telling the United States military, the men and women that are serving in our armed forces, as well as the men and women who are serving in our intelligence forces, to stand down, to disobey, and to refuse any illegal or unlawful orders from President Trump. Now, this is fair. If we have a president who is asking the military men and women to perform anything that is unlawful, that is unjust, and that shouldn't be happening, they have a right and they have the duty, because they swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, they should be able to stand against any of those unlawful orders. But what we're seeing is this: no unlawful order has been given. So why are they doing this? In my opinion, they're doing it to incite political violence. They're doing it to stir the pot, to poke the bear, to say to our military servicemen and women, let me plant this seed in your head so that you can now question the orders that you are giving. So that you can now question, is this lawful or unlawful? I believe that any order that comes from the president, it passes through multiple chain of command. It passes through multiple filters, multiple people, before it ever gets to the people that are actually going to be the ones that are boots on the ground performing and actually making sure that that order is in effect. But I want this to sink in to our minds, to our brains. We have elected officials telling soldiers not to obey the commander-in-chief. Not if they disagree with him politically, not if he's the wrong party, not if the media calls him names. This isn't normal. It's not political rhetoric. This is the kind of message, in my opinion, that collapses nations, that will eventually lead to the collapse of our country if we are not careful. And if we do not take time right now to actively sit down and think through what is happening within our country. Now, can you imagine if Republican officials put out a video telling the military or the intelligence agencies not to follow Obama's orders or Biden's? They'd call it sedition, and they would be right, because that's what it is. But when Democrats do it, what happens? Well, we see in the media that they applaud. We see that on social media, it's amplified. And we see the same people who just watched a woman burned alive in Chicago and a woman stabbed in the neck in North Carolina tell you that you are the threat. So today we're going to be talking about all of this. Not just the violence, but the ideology behind it. Not just the incidents, but the political movement that excuses them, fuels them, and then dares to lecture the rest of us about democracy. Because the truth is simple. A society cannot survive when one political side believes violence is acceptable and obedience to the law and to our nation is optional. If we elect officials who are willing to undermine the military itself to stop the person who we voted for, then the fight for the future of this country is far more serious than what I, or maybe even you, would like to admit. So today, that's what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing all of these events, why they're happening, and what we can do to turn our country around before we are so foregone and we are so far down the road that there's nothing else to do but to continue forward. Now, this is something I've been wanting to discuss for a long time. Really, ever since the Charlie Kirk assassination, it's been something that's been heavy that one would like to avoid completely, right? I don't think there's a day that me as a kid waking up in America ever thought that we would see an actual assassination happen. It's something that you never think would happen until it does. We haven't seen somebody politically assassinated for a very long time. And the fact that not only did we see it happen, but it was widely spread because of social media, because of it happening in my own backyard in Utah. It's something that I don't think we ever prepare enough for. But today I would like to propose what I believe are the key steps that we are seeing happen right now that are leading towards an increase in political violence and ultimately towards civil war. Now, I don't say that lightly. I don't say that for the doom and gloom that it can be misconstrued as. I say it because I believe, and I'm going to lay out the roadmap to why I believe it, that America is heading towards another civil war. But let's first start with the stabbing that we saw in North Carolina a few weeks ago. We have a 23-year-old girl from Ukraine who was here as a refugee, Irina Zrutska. On August 22nd, 2025, she was aboard the train system in North Carolina. And the suspect, DeCarlos Brown Jr., it's crazy that we have to talk about this. He's somebody that has 14 prior arrests in this county of North Carolina before this stabbing ever took place. Now, his criminal history, I have it pulled up. In 2014, he was charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm, and that was dropped after a plea to robbery with a deadly weapon. He was incarcerated in state prison from 2015 to September of 2020. Following his release in 2020, there were documented concerns about his mental health condition because he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And a January 2025 misdemeanor arrest where he reported that someone was controlling him via a substance, eventually released on promise that he would return. I want you to show you, because this is what we're going to break down. These violent criminals, they don't just get released because they tell the guard that they're ready to get into public and that they're all fine and dandy and they're ready to be reintegrated into the public. They're released because we have Democratic law officials as well as Democratic judges who say that these individuals are ready to be released. So I want to show you this. This is Teresa Stokes. She was the judge who let the career criminal, like we've talked about, DeCarlos Brown Jr., walk free, who eventually went on to kill Irina Zrutska. I'm not going to show the video because the video is horrible. It's horrific. It's something that I wish I hadn't seen, but I did. So if you want to go watch it on your own, I would encourage you to do it with very, very extreme caution. The same thing I would encourage you to do if you happen to see or want to see the video of Charlie Kirk being killed. But the reason why I bring this up is because Teresa Stokes, she agreed with DeCarlos Brown Jr. that he would come back, that he would come to court if she released him from custody. It's ridiculous. And eventually what happened? Well, he went on the same train and eventually decided that he was going to kill and to, as he said, get that white girl. He stabbed Irina in the neck while people around her on the train did nothing to help. So she died with no aid, no assistance, no one else around her. A refugee who comes to America to look for help, to look for a better future, to look for a better nation, and to look for the promise of opportunity and America being a safe haven to the country that she came from. She was killed because she just happened to be, in my opinion, in the wrong place at the wrong time. But he, DeCarlos, was let out multiple times. 14 prior arrests. Now, what did we see recently happen in Chicago? We saw Lawrence Reed, who is a 50-year-old gentleman from Chicago, light a girl on fire on the bus. Here's the report. He's charged federally with committing a terrorist attack for setting a woman on fire on a Chicago Transit Authority train, a train, on November 17th, 2025, 3 days ago. He reportedly filled a handheld container with gasoline at a gas station 20 minutes before the attack and ignited the victim while on the train. Prosecutors describe him as having a very long and extensive criminal history and state he had plenty of second chances by the criminal justice system. How many prior offenses did he have? How long was his criminal history? He had 49 prior arrests. 10 of those arrests were felonies. 1 in 5 arrests was a felony committed by this guy. And how did he get out? How was he let back on the streets of Chicago? Well, I'll tell you how. Meet Teresa Molina Gonzalez. She is the county judge who denied the detention request from prosecutors to hold Lawrence Reed in custody after his 49th arrest, allowing him to walk free, to get back on the streets of Chicago, and hey, maybe his 50th arrest would have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe that was the one that would have helped him turn his life around and get him to come back towards the light, towards Jesus, and no longer commit violent offenses or just crime in general. But what we are seeing is in those two situations, Democratic appointed judges releasing these criminals on bail, releasing them back into the public, and allowing them to then go on and commit more violent crimes. Now, here's my question, and I think this is the question that a lot of us would ask. Are these Democratic judges going to be held accountable? I don't know the answer to that question. My hope, my plea, and ultimately my prayer is that they will be. Because what do we see in other situations where something similar happens? Well, I'm not a drinker, but if you go to a bar and you are overserved by a bartender, and then you get behind the wheel, commit a DUI, and ultimately, let's say, kill somebody while driving, we not only hold the person who's behind the wheel But we also hold accountable the bartender who overserved you, who did not recognize that you were overserved, that you were drinking way too much, and actively did it with that knowledge. So my hope is that we see these Democratic officials, Democratic, Republican officials, judges, who write these laws and then stuff like this happens. I hope that they are held accountable because we need the accountability to come. Same thing with these Democratic lawmakers who have come out and released the video. And if you haven't seen the video, well, don't worry. As I always do, let's watch the video together.
Congressman Chris Deluzio joined 5 other Democratic lawmakers, all of them military or intelligence community veterans, to urge current officials to disobey illegal orders. Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin, a former CIA analyst, posted the video. The lawmakers say threats to the Constitution aren't just coming from abroad.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
We know this is hard
and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
the Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you. We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution,
and who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
Slotkin told the New York Times that she's heard from active duty troops who are concerned about the legality of strikes on people the Trump administration says are drug traffickers. The administration called the video an attempt to encourage the military to rebel against Trump.
So if you're not caught up on what's been happening, Trump has been ordering the drone strike of small boats that are carrying illegal narcotics towards America in the Gulf of America to be shot down. This is ultimately leading to greater conflict and greater political intensity. But ultimately, it's not just those strikes. It's what's happening in the city of Chicago. It's what we're seeing happen with this American women getting set on fire. It's what we're seeing happen right now where the mayor of Chicago, the governor of Illinois are citing that Trump's unlawful use of the National Guard to come in and clean up the streets of Chicago is unconstitutional, that it's unlawful, that it holds no grounds, and yet they are the ones that are turning around, looking the American people, especially the citizens in Chicago and in Illinois, looking them in the eyes and saying, everything's fine. You have nothing to worry about. Crime is down. These are isolated incidents. We have nothing to worry about. Yet at the same time, we are seeing the temperature in Chicago increase daily. Now, some might say it's because of the National Guard being there and they're inciting violence and they're stirring the pot to the people so that now the people have to push back. I would say it's because there was already a problem there and the National Guard is probably there for a freaking good reason. Because Trump is trying to clean up the streets and trying to take back the American streets so that it's safe for Americans, tax-paying, law-abiding Americans, to go through and to walk the streets of Chicago, to walk the streets of North Carolina without the fear of being stabbed, lit on fire, or even killed. Now, President Trump, in response to the video that we just watched from Democratic lawmakers, who I might re-emphasize are former intelligent and military personnel. These are people who served in the military, who served in the intelligence community, that are now releasing a video telling that military men and women to disobey Trump's unlawful, unconstitutional strikes. What was Trump's response to this? Well, Trump on Truth Social put out and said that he condemns it forcefully. And he said that this is seditious behavior, which is punishable by death. He also reposted and said to hang them, George Washington would. Now, of course, I sit on both sides of this. I hear Trump say things like that, and in my opinion, on one side, that is inciting violence. That is calling for violence that we don't need more of. But it also is, and this was his point, it's treason. And treason, as a federal law in the United States, is punishable by death. You either get killed or you get imprisoned for a minimum of 5 years, and I think it's like a $10,000 fine if you are convicted. So Trump's not wrong that these lawmakers are inciting violence and are inciting and saying things that are treason. But at the same time, I don't think we need to add that little message of hanging them and killing them. Now, of course, Chuck Schumer, speaking from the Senate floor today, he said that the president is obviously calling for the execution of elected officials. He said that it's an outright threat, that it's deadly serious, and that every time President Trump posts things like this, he makes political violence more likely. My rebuttal to that is, we have seen Chuck Schumer, the Democrats, and people on the left do nothing but be fine with, incite political violence. These are the same people who are affiliated with the same party who laughed at, posted, created memes of, and have done nothing but make fun of the death and assassination of Charlie Kirk. These are the same people that during the 2020 riots didn't condemn the violence that was happening across our country, but continued to incite it, to continue to call upon it, to not come out and say that it's wrong, but to come out and say that it's peaceful, that these are relatively peaceful acts of, people standing up for their rights. These are peaceful demonstrations. So I go back and forth on, do we just get to that point where we say this is treasonous and you should die? Because that's exactly what our law of the land says? I don't know. It's a tough thing to come to grasp with. But for me, I would just hope that people of all political backgrounds, right? Democrat, Republican, Independent, that we would agree that threatening people that you disagree with, it's just beyond who we are as Americans. That we should just get to that point and take steps, multiple steps back, and just come to agree that that can't be where we are as a country. Because if that's where we're at as a country, we have some serious, serious problems ahead of us. Now, what do I mean by that? I want to outline right now for you 9 points that if are hit, if are reached, if we have gotten to, eventually will lead to a new civil war. So here are these 9 points. First, a loss of civic trust. People stop believing the system is fair. Have we gotten to that point? Yeah, I would say it's pretty damn clear. We've gotten past point 1. People no longer believe in the actual trust that we have in our civil matters. People don't trust it, right? Look at what we've got going on right now. with the entire release of the Epstein files. People no longer believe, I'm one of them, believe in the institution that we have as a government, believe in our government officials, believe in what they stand for, what they're supposed to stand for. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I believe in all of those things. The Bill of Rights, of course. But I don't think we, as a nation, as an American people, we believe in or have trust in our civics and in our government. So number one, we have a loss of civil trust. We no longer believe that the system is fair. Number two, polarization hardens into identity. What do I mean by that? Political disagreements is completely normal, but identity conflict is fatal. What we are seeing happen right now in America is we are seeing the rise of identity politics. We are seeing that it's no longer about policy. It's no longer about what you stand for and what you believe in. It's solely based off of who you are as an individual person. We are seeing this happen time and time again in cities. It's no longer about, do you stand for something being right or wrong? We see it now as, who are you? Are you Black? Are you Hispanic? Are you a Native American? Are you somebody who came here legally or illegally? We are seeing identity politics pushed down our throats. And if we see that happen, then we've already reached step 2 and we've surpassed it. That there's a polarization that hardens into identity. It's no longer about what you believe in. It's solely based off of who you are as an individual. Step 3, the breakdown of the gatekeepers. What are the gatekeepers? Let me explain. The gatekeepers are, if you want to call them, the referees, the officials in our communities. They are the media, the churches, their civic leaders. When they disappear, all of those things that I just listed, when they disappear, what we see is extremism fills their void, fills their place. Now we have things like communism entering into our country. We now see that media, the media in general, right? We're talking about the mainstream media. They're no longer referees or peacekeepers. They are now coaches. They are now coaching what is happening in our country. Once we see the breakdown of those, which, once again, I already think we've passed this point. Once we see the breakdown of the gatekeepers, we have taken it down to step 4. Which, step 4, parallel information realities. Civil war doesn't require different opinions. It requires and feeds off of completely different realities. What do I mean by this? Let's look back at history. History is the greatest tool that we have to our use to learn hard lessons. What happened in Nazi Germany before the entire regime took over, the Nazi regime? We saw 2 different polarized realities. You could pick up on the same day 2 newspapers, one that was ran by the Nazi regime and one that was held by or ran by an independent German news source. And you could read the story from both newspapers that covered the same event, the same story, the same topic, and yet they were complete opposites in what they portrayed or what they delivered to be the truth. On one hand, it would be spun one way. On the other, it would be spun the complete opposite. That is what we mean. That is what I mean when we say that there is a parallel information reality. Do I think we're seeing that right now? You tell me. So step 4, I think we've already surpassed it. Step 5, which I would add, we have 9 steps. Step 5 is the pivot point. It's the point where it's not the point of no return. It's the point now where once we've crossed it, we're now on the deep decline. We're on the up climb. Now we're on the decline. Step 5, loss of neutral rule of law. This is the belief that it's not just corruption, but that the law itself is not neutral. What does that mean? Well, it means that we are seeing the law no longer be fair. We are seeing the law targeting people and used for political gain. A CBS YouGov poll says that 60% of Americans say that the justice system is used for political purposes. Well, what does that mean? If we are using our justice system to target and to go after people for political gain, that's what that means. Now, have we seen this happen? I think we have. We've seen the January 6 rioters, which we've covered already. They get thrown into jail for years, multiple years. For an entire administration, 4 years of President Biden in office, a couple of them were still held in prison. But yet in that same time, anyone who was actively participating in the 2020 riots were released. Were not held accountable, were not held in prison, even though there were billions of dollars worth of damages that happened and occurred across our country. They were not held accountable. They were released on bail or just released in general, while January 6 rioters were held in prison for years. That's what we mean when we say that there's a loss of neutral rule of law. We're targeting people for politics. We're targeting them with our justice system. That's the pivot point. I think we've also crossed that as well. Point 6, normalization of political violence. Violence stops shocking us and stops shocking our systems. I think this one is the one that is the most blatantly clear right now for our country. Is this happening? Yes. You're damn straight it's happening. We are seeing that the Charlie Kirk assassination, yes, it shocked us, but to most people in America, they will say they saw it coming. That Charlie Kirk had it coming. That, yeah, if you're going to go around spewing what you're spewing, you had it coming. We also saw this. What happened in Virginia a couple of weeks ago? They voted in to office as the Attorney General, someone who holds and upholds the law in your state, who is the highest elected official in charge of your police, in charge of your rule of law. They elected a new Attorney General who, during his campaign, called for and actively said that it would be okay if a Republican member of the Virginia political arena, can't think for a second, excuse me, he called for the death of a Republican official. He called for the death of that Republican official's children and said that he would want his wife to have to watch her kids be killed. Did that shock people in Virginia? No. How do I know that? How do you know that? Because they still elected him into office as the Attorney General of their state. You can't tell me that political violence shocks us when shit like that happens. Pardon my French. We are past the point. Based off of a PRRI study, 23% of Americans believe that political violence is necessary to save this nation. 23%. Now, it's on both sides of the political aisle. Both the left and the right believe this. But I will say, based off of that same study, that more on the political left believe that political violence is necessary. So are we past point 6? Yes. Yes, we are. Point 7. We're turning the page. The rise of militias and parallel forces. When the state loses its monopoly on force, the countdown accelerates. What do I mean by that? We are seeing right now this happen in specific cities and states. Now, this is the point I believe we are teetering on. I believe that point 7 is where we are currently at, where we are seeing militias and parallel forces come together and actively participate in upholding the law. In Chicago, we see militias forming of people in public deciding to go after the National Guard. We are seeing people incite violence and go after ICE agents, boxing them in, trapping them in their car. This happened in Chicago. Throwing rocks, throwing bricks, punching, kicking, even killing or shooting or threatening to shoot or putting bounties out for the killing of ICE agents. We're seeing it happen not only in Chicago, we're seeing it happen in Oregon, in Seattle, Washington. We are no longer to the point where it's the police or our military that are upholding the law. We are seeing the rise of militias and parallel forces. Once this happens, once we've crossed this point, we are 2 points away, in my opinion, from civil war. So point 8. This is the trigger event. Now, this could be multiple different things. This could be a disputed election that could happen in 2026 or 2028 with the presidential election. This could be a political assassination or a major attack. It could be a Supreme Court decision that creates mass unrest. It could be a financial crisis. It could be state versus federal government standoffs. It could be anything. Because civil wars don't begin with a plan, they begin with a spark. Go back in history, even American history, and review any civil war that has happened or taken place. They don't just start because you've planned to do them. They start with sparks, with ignitions that then go on to fuel giant unrest, violence, and ultimately civil war. I don't think we're at this point yet, but I think the room is being covered in gasoline as we speak. And that all it takes is just the spark, and we're already 2.8. I think we're seeing this right now with our economy. I think we're seeing this with the collapse of the dollar. We're seeing this happen with political violence and political assassinations. Of course, the most recent one being Charlie Kirk. I think we're seeing this with disputed elections. We saw it happen in 2020. Who's to say it doesn't happen again during the midterms in 2026 or during the presidential election in 2028? I only think it's a matter of time. Point 9. This is the final point. When police, military, or federal agencies split. Now, we're already seeing this. Doesn't mean that we're at that point, that we've crossed it, but we are already seeing this. Police force members in New York, after Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City, have already left, are leaving, are planning to leave, and to move out to different cities and different states and join the police forces there, because they refuse to be the police and to uphold the law in New York City. Now, I don't blame them. When Mamdani is outright and calling for the defunding of the police, he said in a recent interview this week that he would get rid of their task force against violence. When he's actively calling for that and saying that the police aren't the answer, that they incite more violence, that their job is not to uphold the law, I don't blame police leaving New York City, taking their families to Texas, taking their families to Florida or elsewhere, and joining the police forces there. When we see the conflicts happening right now between the states of Illinois and the city of Chicago against the federal government, even just recently, the mayor of Chicago called out when he was speaking to the United Nations. This is real. You can look it up. He called out and asked for the United Nations help to push back against what Trump is currently doing by bringing in the National Guard to uphold the immigration laws. You can't make this shit up. When we see conflict arise between cities and states and the federal government, this leads to and will actively lead to passing step 9. When we see distrust happen in the 3-letter agencies like the Department of Justice, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, when we no longer trust those agencies, which I'll be honest with you, I don't trust anymore. I think we've seen countless of examples. The FBI's investigation into the Charlie Kirk assassination, the Department of Justice's release of the Epstein files, and the, in my opinion, active cover-up of the Epstein files. When we get told during the campaign for office that they're going to be the most transparent government and the most transparent administration we've ever seen, and yet they get into office, it's almost been a full year, and we feel no closer to understanding things that happened in our country than we did before, of course we will not trust these agencies. When we see states disobeying immigration law, drug laws, being sanctuary cities, and completely, in my opinion, slapping the federal government and the laws in their face, this all leads to step 9. Now, take a breath. All of that's really heavy. I don't tell you all of these steps. I don't give you these steps or give you this information to scare you. I give you these steps so that we can study them and so that we can wake the hell up. Just like you do when you go to a doctor's checkup and you go get looked at and you go get your yearly, quarterly, bi-yearly checkup from your doctor. You go to find out where you are. You go to the doctors to see, where am I currently at? On the chart, on the scale of obesity, where do I fall under? On the chart of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, where do I fall? We go to get looked at so that we know where we are, which is the exact same reason why I give you these points, so that we can check ourselves as American citizens and know where we currently are. Now, I've given you the 9 points. I personally think we are at point 7. If you think we're further, if you think we aren't that far, let me know. Send me a message, leave a comment. But that's where I believe we currently are. And we are starting to see the seeds be sown for steps 8 and 9 that will ultimately lead us towards a civil war. Now, I don't believe that we are so far past the point of no return. I don't believe that we are so far gone that we have to just put our head down and say, you know what? If it's civil war, then okay, let's do this. I don't think that's the answer. I believe that we can still come back from this, that we can turn our country around, which is the exact reason, one of many, why I started this podcast. Because I want to see a future that we can be proud of, that we built. Whether you're listening to this podcast as a 45-year-old, as a 28-year-old, as a 19-year-old, or somebody who's 12, right? I hope you listen to this and you are inspired and encouraged and uplifted, because I am like you when I say I believe that our best days are ahead of us. I believe that we can still turn this ship around and we can still chart course for a better tomorrow, a better future, and a better country. Not just for me and you to grow up in, but for our kids to grow up in, for their kids to grow up in. I believe that we can still make tomorrow better. But what it's going to take is it's going to take us actively looking in the mirror and saying to ourselves, where are we currently at? Where on this list, these 9 points, where are we at? What can I do today? What can I do tomorrow to make our future America better? My hope, my goal is to continue to do this, to continue to raise awareness, to continue to bring you the news, unfiltered, uninterrupted, and not biased. That's my goal. That's my hope. But it's not just going to take me. It's going to take all of us. Now, I know as I say this, there's not many of you listening, and that's okay. You got to start from somewhere. But I would encourage you to review these steps. Review them often. To think long and hard about where we're at. To share this episode, share these points with friends, family members, those of you who you love in your life, so that they too can wake up and realize where we are as a nation, where we are as a people here in America. I believe, and I'll continue to say it, the future is something that we build together. We have to build it together. And if we're willing to do that, if we're willing to stand hand in hand, arm in arm, and stand up to evil, no matter what face it shows itself in, then we are the people who will build a greater and better future. Like, comment, subscribe, share this episode, share the podcast with those who you care about. We'll be back next week in the studio. As I've said before, next week is Thanksgiving, so we'll be coming out with a single episode instead of the normal 2. I appreciate you all listening. Please message me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Let me know what you like or don't like about the show, what you'd like to hear covered. I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate your support in this endeavor. The future is alive, and it's something that we can build together. As long as we decide right now that we want to build a better future. I'm Bryce Wheeler. Thanks again for listening in. We'll see you next time. This is We, the Future.